Tracey, thank you so much for joining me here today on Who's Behind the Headline. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
So we formed a relationship throughout the missing persons case of Elsie Wigington, and I was truly just so inspired by your fight for your foster sister, your tenacity, the ability to not give up. You know, throughout my career, I am reminded over and over again how much family matters in a situation like this, because there will be people who will try to push it aside, and it's really up to the family to continue to fight for justice the whole time. And in this case, I do believe Elsie got some sort of justice. There was a sentencing, and I did want to check in with you on, how you've been since the sentencing.
So it's really funny. Like you said, it is a form of justice, and it's weird. It's hard to put into words. So when the families are fighting, and when you're fighting for justice, and you're trying to, you have that cause and you're running with it, and it's your family and it's close to your heart. Your whole world is invested in this. And after the sentencing and everything starts to settle, you are left kind of alone with yourself and with your family. The world moves on for everyone else, because for them it's final. You have the closed book. But for your family and for yourself, there's still this piece of you that, I still miss Elsie every day. Her kids still miss Elsie every day. Um, and if that family member is an integral piece of your
Yeah.
family, it's difficult. We do feel better because we do realize that there has been accountability assigned. And that's huge. That's huge. I don't know how families do it that don't have the answers, that don't get the answers or don't get the justice. I have a friend of mine, and she's been trying to get justice for her sister who disappeared, similar circumstances, and Christy has tried to get that book closed, and it hasn't happened for her, and I could not be in her shoes.
Yeah. Definitely. I know, and it was a hard road to get there, but once you found the right sheriff,
Yes.
once you had the right eyes on the case, it is honestly kind of incredible how fast things started to pick up. And, you're completely right. I have so many conversations of almost identical cases that happened maybe 20, 25, 30 years ago. And, those people still do not have answers. They might know who did it, but there's still
Yes.
been no accountability.
Right. And I agree. Having the law enforcement that will take you seriously and not just blow it off. Because, I mean, honestly, their jobs are difficult. Their jobs are difficult to begin with. And we can say what we want, but until put their shoes on and go out into the community and deal with what they deal with on the daily, we really don't know. We know, though, when it's our family, that they're the first persons that we call, and we want them to take that immediate interest. Um, so until we got Sheriff Ayers in there to dig deeper, and he held his team accountable, and that made the difference. It wasn't a pass the buck. It wasn't, well, this happened during the last sheriff's. It was, let's solve this problem.
Yeah, he took it extremely seriously. I mean, you could tell he was emotional several
Hmm.
times. You could tell it was personal to him, and I think that's really important when it comes to these types of cases, because they're not always easy. You're not always going to have that physical evidence. I mean, in this case, there did happen to be a lot of good evidence once they started digging and asking those questions. But, I did want to ask you, throughout the trial, you weren't really able to sit in on the trial. And I think maybe we all kind of thought, you and a lot of other family members of Elsie's would have been able to sit in and hear all the details, but you were allowed in the end. And I saw you and a lot of her other family members get really emotional. I can imagine that that was difficult, and obviously take your time, you know, expressing what you want about that. But I did want to hear kind of a little bit about that process for you.
I want to be 100% honest, and I'm going to say that it is a very good thing that I was not in that courtroom when the evidence was being when they were going through the evidence as a whole until the end. I tell my students all the time, perspective means everything, and your perspective is based on what you know and what you experience. I held one little chunk of that information, one little chunk. Sativa held a chunk. Everybody held a chunk. And then when you hear it all laid out, it is disheartening. It is,
Yeah.
and you say to yourself, and you will beat yourself up and say, I should have done this. I should have done that. I will forever live with I should have gotten into the car and driven the 4 hours. I asked her, are you okay? I knew I'd never heard her sound as stressed out and as afraid as she sounded.
Yeah.
And I asked her, my husband's like, tell her we'll get in the car now. We'll meet down at the Sheets and come and get her. She just needs to stay in a public place for 4 hours until we get there. I wish I had. I wish I had.
And I know that you're not the only, family member of someone who was taken in an act of violence, domestic violence, whatever it was, that feels that way, that is kind of left to feel some type of guilt. Um, but we know, I think maybe now you've kind of been thrust into this world of domestic violence and learning more about it. We learn how the most dangerous time for a woman is when she leaves, which is
Yes.
so frustrating because it's like, then what do we do? What do we do if that's the most dangerous time when, we want victims to leave? We want people to get out.
And the thing is, it's not just for women. Here in Maryland, we've had several cases of domestic violence where, we've had firefighters, male firefighters that were killed by females as they were trying to leave the relationship. I don't know what the answer is. As a society, I just think, getting the information out there and taking it seriously and being a, not being afraid to have those crucial conversations. Elsie and I had talked, my daughters stayed the summers, up there with, my niece and nephew's biological father, and Elsie would come and get them and do, she'd stay and do stuff in the summer. The first summer that Abby came back and told me, Mom, Aunt Elsie, she's got bruises all over her and stuff like that. And, I had that conversation. Else, what's going on? Don't tell me that, what's going on. And she was like, oh, it's okay. I made him mad. Next time I'll do better. And these should have been flags. These should have been flags for me to, have a deeper, crucial conversation. When the first time when she tried to leave him, he came to Maryland. He came after her, and he had a gun that time. He got a gun. He called a charge. It got swept over, in the lay of the land and how things went. It was one of those things that was overlooked. I just wish we would have pushed it. I wish we would have pushed it harder. I wish I would have pushed it harder. Um,
Yeah.
you know,
I think that's one of the hardest things because the family is left with so many regrets when, like, at the end of the day, there's only one person responsible for Elsie's murder, and that person is now behind bars. But I mean, how could you not? It's really, it feels super personal because all you want is for that person to be happy, healthy, and safe.
happy.
Yeah.
And I think part of the denial, and to be honest, we as a family discussed at one point, okay, so what has happened? We filed missing persons reports. We have sheriff's deputies telling us, adults leave all the time. She's a grown adult, and we're like, yes, but she wouldn't walk away from her job, her children, her vehicles. This isn't what happens. But then part of you says, well, maybe she did because she was so unhappy. Maybe she just needed a break. And so you wait another week before you call because you're hoping for that. You want that. And then when you don't get, when that is not the outcome, um, it does make it even worse. It does. And I think it's human nature to want the best and to believe that this bad isn't going to settle, on you. And it makes it, I think it kind of magnifies the guilt that you feel, the survivor's guilt. I don't know what you would categorize it. The survivor's guilt. I don't know. I don't know if that's what it's
Yeah.
called because, you know,
I know. I don't know either, but I think, I think it is a form of survivor's guilt. I know I can imagine that I'd feel very similar if someone that, was like a sister to me or even a friend to me, went through something. And, obviously you spoke with Elsie too, right before essentially it happened. And it was almost like you were so close, to like getting her away and like maybe things being different this time. But I also know, like, can't look back, right? You can't just like
right.
say the what ifs because the outcome, I believe, likely would have been the same because of
Yeah.
who her
Well,
husband was, who Fred
right.
was. Like,
Ev- Even after he killed her, when he found out that we had documentation, there's call records, there's in this day and age, um, and even after he found out and prior to him being arrested, I have a protection order because he came here and stopped us.
yeah,
And this is all a matter of legal record. So he stopped us and he said they're going to need your phone to find your body too. And this was before he was arrested. So I do believe that had she, I part of me is able to rationalize that had she come, she probably the outcome may have been the same. He would have gotten her some way, shape, or form, waiting for her to go to work, whatever. Um, Part of me, I know that it's just it's difficult to because that game of would have, should have, could have,
yeah,
it kills you. It kills you. Um, the kids, they're getting some therapy, of course. Um, I haven't really sought out therapy for this, because I don't know what I would say. I don't know. I'm in the mindset that I don't think, I don't think that, I don't know. I don't think that it would be beneficial for me because I
yeah,
think I know myself well enough to know I'm going to beat myself up until the day that I die, over it.
yeah,
And I don't, regardless of whatever the outcome would have been, I'm still going to play that if only would have, should have, could have game.
right. I mean, this is what I like to call, and especially in this new podcasting world, but I've been calling the aftermath of tragedy. There's so much that comes with it.
Okay.
That's why when people take a life, I don't know if they just like I don't know what happens, but they do not think about the extreme series of events that follow, and the generational trauma that will follow with Elsie's children and not having their mother and not having a grandmother there, and there's so much that goes with it. And I hope that you can at least give yourself a little bit of grace and just understand that you are in this aftermath of tragedy and you are healing and you're having to deal with something that you know none of us should really ever have to navigate.
And I think it's so funny because human nature and is so it's so tenuous because when you look at the fact that Elsie and I were in the foster care system. That in and of itself brings its own sense of baggage and childhood trauma. And then you go on and it does make you respond. It doesn't define who you are, but it taints everything that you do. And so I think that that is part of the reason also why I don't seek out like counseling and stuff like that, because I feel that it is just such deep rooted, um, a deep rooted response. I just, you know,
I understand that. And things might change, whatever feels right, whenever it feels right, you'll be able to figure that out and feel that out. And if right now not seeking out help feels best for you, it feels like you're able to manage it, or maybe that like maybe it's not time to open up those wounds completely yet. Just like you say, you're
yes,
very thankful that you weren't there in the trial. Like maybe it's like
yes.
it's just not time yet. And when it is time, the right time will come. Um, I do want to talk to you about your daughter too, if you're okay with switching gears a little bit,
Yeah.
because, this wasn't your first extreme traumatic familial death. And, I can imagine, I mean, I can't imagine, honestly, losing a child. Um, but first, let's just talk to me a little bit about Jessica. Who she was, what made her so special.
So Jessica was my Cinco de Mayo baby. She was born on May 5th. Just just full of life, just full of life. She was so smart, and she was walking and talking at a very young age. She loved music. By the age of 5, she would tell you, "I'm going into the army and I'm going to be a veterinarian." She had a plan. She was very charismatic. Ornery, ornery as she could be. Let me tell you, it wasn't all good. It wasn't all good because we had a lot of orneriness. The sass ran deep with her. Um, but she was a great all around kid, and a life that was definitely cut short way too early. And we miss her. We miss her very much.
Yeah. When I look at her, I mean, she looks like your twin, and I can just like was telling you, I can feel that ball of energy through every picture. You could feel that spunk and that excitedness and that just like love for life. If you feel comfortable, do you mind talking to me a little bit about that day? And
Sure.
I'll ask you, obviously what got you through, but starting with that.
Okay. So, on July 13th of 2004, the day started like any other day, except there were a couple of things. When we started that morning, so Jess was 6 years old, and at night she always took a binky with her. Whether it was for security reasons for her, whatever it was, I don't know. But we'd been doing the battle of, okay, it's time to get rid of the binky. You're 6 years old. Let's move on. That morning she got up and she went and she threw her binky in a trash can. And I'm like, Jess, don't do that because I'm going to have to hunt down another binky unless you're sure. Why don't you let mommy hold it just in case? Because those 12 o'clock, middle of the night crying for the binky would be too much. So she said, nope, I'm not going to need it anymore. She threw it in a trash can and we proceeded to have our breakfast. Where we live is a very urban area in Baltimore, Maryland, and at that time there was a group of us young moms who we had worked out a schedule because between having kids and having a part-time job and trying to take care of your house, it would get to be a lot. So we worked out a schedule where 1 week out of the month we would all take turns. So it was my day. I would have the kids in the morning. I would feed them lunch, and then they would transition over to Christina's house for the afternoon, and she would have them in the afternoon. And throughout the week, a different parent would have them, and the kids, it had worked. We'd been doing it for about 2 years. And it was great. The kids all had a great time. They were all around within the same age group and everything. I made lunch for the kids. We had gone out. Jessica had a rabbit, and she loved animals. So she had rabbit, turtle, lizards, cats, dogs. And so we were kind of like the neighborhood. Come over, pet your animals. Let's do our homework together. House. Um, because of the urban area, how we live in what's called a row home. It's the older row homes. And behind our house is an alleyway. The alleyway is 15 feet wide. And it's supposed to be in optimal issues. It's supposed to be a way for the trash trucks to get in and out, to remove the trash, people to have a place to park their car on your carport because the streets are very busy. Um, and up over the years, kids, they play in the alleys because it's all concrete here. It's urban. There's no areas for them to play. So, but we do have like little backyards. So all the kids had lunch. We were going through to Christina's. I walked the group of kids over to Christina's gate because our gates face each other. And the kids went in. Christina's yard has a lot of clover, and that's one of the reasons why Jess liked to go over there because she would pick clover for her rabbits. But this particular day, the clover was high and there were a lot of bees. And I said to Jess, be careful for the bees. She said, I'm going to get my flip-flops. And so I was standing at the gate. She ran over to onto our carport, went in through the gate, grabbed her shoes, and came back out to where we would park our cars. And I could hear music thumping. I could hear gears shifting. So I knew that somebody was flying up through the alley. And I saw Jess come to the end of the thing. She did one of those kids, look, and start to dart over. And I started yelling, no, 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 because coming around the turn, my eye caught the vehicle. The girl was on her cell phone and speeding, with music blaring, and lost control coming around the turn, went up onto our carport, and she struck Jessica head on. I started screaming and ran out in front of her vehicle. Jessica was under her front tire. Um, I she had hit her and then just bounced back. And so I told her she needed to back up. She backed up, and then she got out of the car and she was just like looking. I started CPR right away. I did CPR on Jess for 18 minutes. Anyone who has had to do CPR on somebody will tell you 18 minutes is a long time. On that particular day, on that particular afternoon, the responding units had to come from Dundalk because there were so many accidents in the area. There wasn't anybody local to respond. My world stopped. It So prior to this, I worked for MedStar and was 2 years away from getting my physician assistant, certified medical assistant, and the clinical part of me kicked in. The clinical part, it's an emergency, clinical part kicks in, and you start doing what you've been trained to do. I've been trained to save lives, do CPR, you follow the book, people survive. I did everything that I was trained to do, and I could not save my own daughter.
I can imagine, obviously, your experience of what happened. You witnessed probably almost in slow motion, almost every aspect of it. And, not only did you lose your daughter, but you were there, like you said, doing CPR for 17 minutes, which I can't even imagine. I I'm so sorry that, you had to deal with such a tragic heartbreak. How did you get through those first few days, which then obviously turns to months, weeks, years? What got you through?
I tell you, family. My cousin, first off, my neighbor right next door. She was a nurse. She was like, she had lived next to us since the girls were really young. And she swooped in like a mother and, helped to organize everything, helped to take care of everything. My cousin Karen, made sure, we had meals, we had everything. Elsie came in to help with the kids. Um, that first night, you know, they landed life flight at the school in Maryland, as probably is with all other states. You don't give up on the child. You continue until you get to shock trauma. You continue till you get to where you're going, the trauma center, and the child will be pronounced there after they do their thing. Because of the extent of Jessica's injuries, they called it while they were flying her to shock trauma. So you go numb. It's almost like a dream. It's almost like a dream. You don't feel anything. Um, when we got there, and the doctors came out and talked to us, and then they give you time in the room alone, it felt surreal. I honestly thought maybe I'd had a heart attack or something. Like maybe I saw the accident happen and I had a heart attack and I needed to wake up. I felt like I lacked feeling so much. My body was just so numb. And then we came back home, and that night I said to my husband, I said, look, I said, all I need you to do is you go down and you turn on the gas stove, and I'm going to light a cigarette, and it'll be done. Just leave the gas burning. I'm going to light a cigarette. It'll be done, because I can't do this. And he said, no, no. I begged him to, and he said no. And you disconnect from yourself, you disassociate from yourself, and you get numb, and you go through the process. As a culture, we have created this process of, okay, we have to set the funeral up, we have to do this. So you go through the process, and it helps you to distance. However, I kept waiting, like I kept thinking, this is not right. Like, this is not, like, Jess is still alive. They've told me the wrong information. And I'm searching, like I'd search everywhere. I would search everywhere just looking. Is that my kid? Is that Jess? That looks like Jess. That might be Jess. And just when it wasn't Jess, I kept saying, okay, I've had a heart attack. I need to wake up. I need to wake up. How do I wake myself up from this? I'm in a drug-induced coma from a heart attack. How do I wake myself up?
Yeah.
And,
I've heard many other mothers and fathers who have lost their children who, it might be a 5-year anniversary and they still will say it doesn't feel real. I think it's because it's not supposed to happen that way. And at Jessica's young age of just 6 years old, out doing what kids do, playing. And believe me, I'm from a metropolitan area. I grew up in a row home. I grew up on probably the same type of block, and like my street is super narrow, and kids are
Mhm.
constantly running across it, and animals. And we have had people fly down, and people in the neighborhood get really upset about that because it is so dangerous. And I think too, maybe what brings not only sadness and the trauma, but then also this anger that the way her life was taken, like it was extremely preventable.
Yes. And I have to tell you, the anger does set in. It will set in after the disbelief and everything, and after the bargaining, the anger, it comes. And it came and it hit me full force. And um I knew that there's a line that you cannot cross. I knew that I could not cross that line because I had Abigail that I had to continue to raise. And I didn't want anyone else raising her but me, and so I had to focus that. And how I focused that anger was to fight, because as time, and one of the things that I should mention here, at the time when Jessica was killed, in alleyways. Alleyways are considered private property with public access. Even though you are in an urban area, it is private property with public access. What that means at that time was there was no enforceable speed limit. It was on private property. In the state of Maryland at that time, the lowest enforceable speed limit was 25 miles an hour. So, um, even at 25 miles an hour, if that had been in place, and if there were, cell phone laws at that time, there still would have been 25 miles an hour hitting a child it would have still done damage. It would have still killed someone Jessica's stature. Um, so I use that anger to fuel me to go and try and get laws enacted. Um, there is currently a cell phone law in the state of Maryland. There is currently the Jessica Coleman alleyway law in the state of Maryland. When that law went through, um, at that time, it was at 25 miles an hour. That was the lowest enforceable speed limit. However, as time has gone on, they have lowered it and lowered it. And while it didn't give me any legal recourse, it helped the next family, because there will be a next family. So I take consolation in that. The girl that killed Jessica got a ticket from the state of Maryland for her bumper height on her Jeep exceeding the allowable limit, because she had broken no law. She had killed my daughter and broken no law. She wasn't under the influence, and she was on private property. Um, that was infuriating. That 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 was infuriating. Um, so
So
yeah,
she just got
the
a
anger.
ticket? Is that what you're saying? Just a ticket?
She did. She got a ticket. Um,
Were they unable
yeah.
to prove the texting and driving at that time?
There were no laws at the time that
Oh,
had anything.
wow.
At the time there was no there was no law against it. She
Right.
didn't break a law. In Maryland, distracted driving comes under like the use of at that time, use of a substance, and there was no use of a substance. Yeah.
I'm so sorry that, I mean, now things have changed, but there are still states where when I was living in Missouri, it was legal to text and drive above the age of 21, which,
That's
and I mean, for all of us, like a lot of us take that for granted, but with you, you have actually faced the first hand terrible effects of
the
texting and driving, and
devastation.
I can imagine the devastation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. It is it's crazy. I as a sane person, I can look and say, as a culture, we have moved forward with this. We have laws now. As a parent, I'm pissed off that we didn't have those laws back then. Um, I had there was nothing. My hands were tied. This girl killed my daughter and got away with it because she did it in an alleyway. Um, and, she has to wake up and look herself in the mirror every day knowing what she did. And at the time, she was young. I am sure by now she has children of her own. And I am sure that fear, because she knows what she did to our family, that fear eats her alive. And as petty as that sounds, I'm for it.
Yeah, I understand. I mean, exactly what you said. It's more of a known thing now. It's talked about now. And I can't imagine if I was in her shoes. I know it's something that would eat me alive for the rest of my life, but I'm very sorry that, you didn't have. I know it wouldn't be justice because nothing would bring Jessica back, but you know, something, at least something to kind of at least maybe deter the
Yeah.
behavior, so that it doesn't happen again. And I know that, you sent me like newspaper clippings. It seems like you really were Jessica's voice after this happened.
I think it's important. One of the things that no matter when someone close to you dies, there is a process for grieving. And the natural order of things dictates that, your parents are going to die before you. Your siblings may die before you. To have to bury your own child is that there are no words for it. Um, I it's it's kind of crazy what people say to each other, when you lose your child. Um, oh, she's in a better place. That used to drive me nuts. No, no, I want her here with me. What is a better place than here with her family? Um, they and it's hard when everyone's life goes back to normal and yours doesn't. People move on and, it's the next thing, it's the next, and you're kind of stuck. And you said something about earlier, you mentioned about parents still having that feeling at, you know, 5 years later, even. And for me, I can tell you the seventh anniversary of Jessica's death was so extremely hard because she had been gone officially longer than she'd been on this earth. And, I had a family member say to me probably 3 years after Jess had been gone, "Oh, you should be over it now." You don't get over it. Any type of grief, you do not get over it, you get through it. And you do have to be careful of getting stuck in one of, the stages too long, but you never get over it. You just get through it and your life changes and you get like a new norm, but you're never the same. I am not the same person today that I was on July 12th of 2004. And I know people can say, "Oh, well, you're supposed to evolve as a person." Well, unfortunately, I didn't evolve. I don't think that I evolved. I everything is tainted. It's
Yeah. And I think, a lot of parents who lose their children in a traumatic way, they feel the same because, like you said, the world keeps moving for everyone else. And people don't even, I think a lot of people don't realize how insensitive their comments can be, and just also like how much grace and care you need to have when interacting with someone who has lost their child, because it I think it changes your body chemistry, it changes your immune system, it changes, some people aren't able to work, you can get a broken heart syndrome. There's so many things that come along with it, that, you don't just get over that type of that type of loss. And, were you ever able to find a community maybe that helped you, that accepted it, or maybe that had, experienced something similar?
So, I ended up going through a really bad depression, and I knew that I needed to seek out something. So I started getting some books and looking, what books can I read that, might help me process this, because it was a matter of not processing it. And then I did reach out to some grief. They were like groups, just kind of like at churches or whatever. And what I found is that it's so difficult. It does help you. You need to get out there and you need to socialize and you need to talk about it. And that doesn't mean that you need to talk about it with your friends. I could tell you this. Your friends are uncomfortable about talking about your child, and you will find out, because what happens, the worst thing that happens is they stop mentioning your child's name. They stop talking about your child. So now not only has your child physically are they gone, but now nobody's talking about it, and then you wonder, do they even remember? It's this whole cycle. So, reaching out to grief and getting some grief counseling through, like, groups, that helped. What it also made me realize was that there are not enough of them out there, and, that it's good to have an eclectic group. A lot of parents in the groups are dealing with long-term sicknesses. Their child has been sick for a long time, and their child is slowly dying, and that's difficult. And I have to say, by the grace of God, I did not have to deal with that. Um, so what I ended up actually starting a nonprofit and a community outreach. So we did that kind of counseling and stuff for a while. Um, I'm still active in the community, in different fashions, especially with what I do, with my job through Arrow. We deal with a lot of childhood trauma and stuff like that as well. So it's therapeutic for me as well. Um, so I would say the best thing to do is, even though you think you may not need that type of group interaction, if somebody is struggling, they should reach out, because it does help. It's cathartic. It was cathartic for me to just go in, and I didn't talk at first. You keep it very private, but you listen, and then you start to make the connections of other people who are going through this too. You are not the only one. You are not alone. There is someone else out there walking this walk. And while it may not be in the same exact shoes, and while it may not be the same path, they are walking that walk. And having that connection will make a difference. Even if, for me, it was helping other people. Getting that cup of coffee with them, sitting down and talking.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, when I met you and you were experiencing, I mean, as the case went on and we learned more about Elsie's case, I think we all kind of realized early on it wasn't going to be a good result. And
Right.
I knew you were going through such a traumatic situation, with Elsie's murder, but I had no idea that, what you had experienced with your daughter. And I think it just goes to show that we really never know what people are going through. And it's just so important to be kind and to be, um, you know, careful and really, hold space for people. And I really appreciate being able to speak with you today, and you so vulnerably share stories about your daughter and what you went through. And I think hearing from you, other people are going to be able to find some healing, because what do you do? I mean, right? What do you do when something like this happens and your whole world is completely spun into a direction where you truly feel like nothing is even real?
Right.
So, closing, I guess I would just ask you, with experiencing the death of your daughter and experiencing the death of Elsie, first of all, I just am so, I just admire you so much for being able to gracefully, get through both of those. And I would just ask you, is there anything that you want to leave our viewers with, um, as we close?
There there actually is. If you are going through the loss of a loved one, I think it's very important that you know there is no right or wrong way to grieve. There is no amount of time that you have to grieve. Give yourself grace. Grieve in the manner which feels appropriate to you because that is going to start your healing. It, don't feel that you are walking this walk alone. However, don't feel that you have to take the well trodden path. There is no right or wrong way to grieve, and there is no time specifically designated, no time limit.
Well, thank you so much for coming on my podcast today and joining me here on Who's Behind the Headline. I really appreciate it. And it's always just so great to speak with you. And again, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.